Hello, the world. Welcome back to this episode of Transitioning Humanitarians Life with your host, the Seller Monova, because Vika is still on her trip. So that's why I continue doing this work. And this time in September, I thought it's a high time we talked about transitioning to big leaps or with big leaps, whichever the way you want to talk about. Because I did a podcast episode on this, which you can check out on my social media, and I see that there is a lot of interest in exploring that topic. And I thought that in the context of transitioning, let's start this September dedicating to how can we make big leaps to where we want to go, and how or what are the things that we need to learn in the process of doing it. And I want to here define the way how I see big leaps. And of course, it's a very subjective view. So you can also define your own way of what big leap could mean to you and how it could look like and how you could do that. And I want to also speak to why we may need big leaps for many of us and why it's something that we can learn instead of making this big, like mystical or secretive or whatever thing that only a few can do kind of thing. So, first, let's talk about big leaps and what it means and how I see it, right? So, big leap for me is going from one direction to a 108-degree or 67, 360 degrees different direction and going so making that leap from one direction that we're going to the totally opposite direction or totally different direction that we have decided to change, right? That could be one way of looking at it. That is in terms of like directions and what the big leap in terms of that direction could look like. Big leap in terms of shift or steps that we may take or like skip several steps or making big changes or big um, difference could be something like you being this person today. Let's say that person who has difficulty saying no to, who has difficulty setting boundary, whatever it is, or who has difficulty being totally you, and then the big leap of being the person who is totally you all the time, no matter who's in front of you, no matter what's going on, you always being you and exploring being you, whichever the way you choose to, and that big leap that you can see in terms of how the shift is, right? What the difference is. And the reason why I think that we need to talk about this big leap is because many of us humanitarians have maybe tried to um, make like incremental changes in our environment. So some of the ways that we have probably changed is that we have tried to go to a different position, hoping that things will be different, maybe, or trying to go to different duty stations, trying to change organizations, try to go from field position to a headquarter position or other way around, right? So we may have tried so many different ways of changing and then still feeling like that's not what I want, or still feeling like that's not how I want to contribute in the world, or that's not how I want to make my impact, or that's not um, how I want to live my life because I want to include all my loved ones and other people into my life on my daily basis, right? So that's why whatever the things that we may have tried until now, and then keep realizing that that's not really what I want to. So then the question is, how can I make that big leap to something totally different than I have done all my life so far? And that would be big leap too, right? So for instance, now let's say that you've decided work is not only the priority that you have, but you have other priorities and they all coexist, like maybe two or three priorities coexist, and how you can be the person who can have two or three priorities coexisting at the same time, one being you, one being work, one being your loved ones, or other way around. So whichever the way those priorities, how can you have them both, right? So like shifting and becoming the person who has that, who achieves that, would be also a big leap. And many of humanitarians may find themselves finally in that time or in that space where, excuse me, where we feel like um, we have tried every other incremental or gradual way of changing things, and things didn't work the way we want to, or maybe we have grown in those places and now we feel like it's time to change to a totally different lifestyle, change to a different way of living, different way of running our routines, whatever it is, right? So these are the big leaps I'm talking about. That's why for those of us who want that big leap, what are the things that are required for us to be able to do that? Because I think many of us have this idea that big leaps are very difficult to do. It's almost impossible. It's only available to a certain few. I don't have this character traits, or I don't have this risk tolerance level. I don't have this. I don't have that. And I see many of us doing that to ourselves instead of really exploring what that big leap could be and how we could actually get ourselves to that place step by step, and focusing on those things, right? So the way that I want to describe my own experience is that um, these are the four elements that I have found to be so crucial to making that big leap. And I have seen this now with several of my clients doing that as well. And I see this importance of these elements all over again. And that's why I want to present to you these four elements. And also, of course, in throughout September, I will be discussing each of them more in depth and give you more ideas of what I mean by those each elements, right? And of course, it doesn't mean that these are the only ones or these are like exclusive or whatever, but these are the things that you can learn. These are all the skills that you can learn, like any other skill that we do learn. And therefore, making big leap not difficult thing to achieve, or like not getting our head around it, but rather being very specific as to what will get us to that big leap. So in the first element is recognizing what is our current or future drives that we have in whatever part of our lives we're in now, right? So that's always the biggest. And the reason why I say the word recognize is because oftentimes we think about it, we may know them, we may not accept them, but finally the stage that we need to get ourselves to is recognizing that this is it. This is the thing that really drives me. This is the thing that I really want to, whatever that big leap is, or whatever that destination is, sorry, whatever that destination is, we need to recognize it and then decide on it. So the way that I have done it at the time when I was transitioning from humanitarian world to from being employed to being self-employed, right? That's the big leap that I took, or from being in the identity of the organization or the identity of being a humanitarian to being the person who does coaching, who um, helps people to define their own identity. So these are the big leaps that I have done, and in those times when I was doing it, the first thing that I needed to recognize was that I want to truly follow my passion. I will always want to be the person who always follows my passion and doing it for the passion of doing that work, and at the same time being the person who is with her loved ones and choosing to live in the places I want to, right? So these were the driving factors at the time, where I wanted to have this freedom, the inner freedom, to be able to say, this is, I can do whatever the life I want to. That was my, at the time, destination. Um, so therefore, recognizing what that destination is, what is it that we're like going for, is obviously always the first thing that we need to recognize and decide that this is what I want. The second element that I see that is so useful here, but also in so many other elements, or sorry, on so many other contexts, learning certain life skills, I would say. And the reason why I think of it life skill is because it's used everywhere, basically. And one of them is honesty, and that's so, so crucial. The other one is not being afraid of any emotions and talking to them and allowing them those emotions and everything to do around our own emotions and getting to know them, basically. And then developing the skill of commitment, determination. These are the, like, I would say, four elements within that learning the life skill element. That's the second one. The third one is then start executing it within our current environment where we are and start seeing how it will all work out before going out and exploring in the real world, right? Meaning that actually going for making those changes and all of this. And that's why I did that myself in the back in the day is when I was thinking about going to do the coaching work, and I knew that that would be like a big leap for me because it will involve a lot of uncertainties, a lot of fears coming up and all of this stuff. So that's why I started thinking about, okay, how can I practice whatever I want to do outside currently where I am so that I can get a taste of how it looks like, right? And then when I make the jump, when I make that shift, when I change the course of the direction, then it will be obviously still different than when I'm doing it within the constraints of my work environment. But at least it will give me ideas of what I need to work on, what I need to prepare myself, and all of this stuff. So that's why big leap doesn't need to be like from one day to another. Okay, let's go and burn the bridges and all the things, because I think for many of us that's very impossible thing to do. But the goal is here to really um, believing that we can do that big leap, whatever that big leap for us means. And we can do that by first testing it within the confines of where we are comfortable already. And then the fourth element is allowing all of the feelings that we don't want to allow, like uncertainty, fear, discomfort. These are the three that comes up. That is very often that is the reason why we don't want to do the things because we're afraid of failing, we're afraid of judgment, we're afraid of uncertainty, we're afraid of feeling uncomfortable. All of these are things that we're afraid of, and learning how to allow them. And it's also a great environment where we are currently, where we can test all of these and how we're getting good at learning that skill. And then once we learn that skill, then it becomes so much more easier to just make that jump, to that make that shift, to make that 360 change of directions. And that becomes so much easier. Now, of course, all of these four elements that I'm talking about, all of this will require one thing, and that's I keep talking about it all the time as much as possible. And that requirement is trusting yourself. Because if you don't trust yourself, then even if you do recognize what is it that you're driving you, you will not want to make a decision about right? And even if you do make a decision about it, you will want to change it immediately so that you don't feel that anxiety or you don't feel that fear or whatever else come up in that moment. So that's why, like throughout all of these four, there's always trust element that runs through everything, and that's why I stress it a lot with my clients. I stress how important that is to trust our wisdom and our recognition of what is it that we're wanting and deciding on it. Our trust that we can learn these skills of being honest with ourselves, being honest with others. We can learn the skill of feeling committed to things that we want. We can learn the feeling of determined so that we can get things done, right? So these are all the skills that we can learn if we trust that we are capable of learning. The great news is that many humanitarians, I would say probably all of us, I mean, I have no data for it, but judging by how many like certificates I see online as to how humanitarians are learning this skill and that skill and third skill and fourth skill, how much we're learning suggests to me that we're good at learning skills. Now, the important part becomes is when then we trust ourselves to apply those skills to what we're wanting. That's the part that's so key, right? And the same goes with the third element of, okay, I have learned these skills. Now I can apply them here in the confines of where I am, and then start applying and start learning from each of them, and then crafting those skills even more and more. And then at the same time, allowing all of these uncomfortable sounding, negative sounding feelings to be there and still keep going for what we want. The way that I have really truly transitioned without looking back or without wanting to go back, I think is the reason why I really felt comfortable with my emotions of feeling like I can feel whatever comes up. I'm ready for it, right? Because I knew that I was already feeling a lot of them in my previous experience. And therefore, I understood that it's a human experience to feel all of this tiredness, disappointment, failure, whatever, shame, all of this I was feeling in my previous environment. So I thought to myself, if I can feel it there, why wouldn't I be feeling it somewhere else? And I think for many of us, the biggest challenge to feel is the uncertainty and relying, trusting yourself in those uncertain times to keep going for what you want. I think that's a skill that we really need to learn, and that will come after we have made that shift. We have made that change because within the confines of where we are, we cannot unfortunately learn so much about dealing with uncertainty unless, of course, you start recognizing how you're already in uncertain environments. But I think for some reason, when we think about uncertainty, we often think about our contractual situation. We often think about what the job that we can do on a daily basis, and knowing certainty of it is what we mean by uncertainty. Even though if you think about it, many humanitarians are working in very uncertain environments with very uncertain conditions, but still our brains don't consider that as much of a problem or as much of a like we don't think of ourselves as being people who are good at like dealing with uncertainties. And as soon as we start pursuing something else totally different than what we were doing before, then all of a sudden we're like, we all have all of these uncertainties and I don't know what to do, even though we have been dealing with those uncertainties for so long, but we don't recognize them as much. But once we start going on our own, let's say for many of us, right, it may be the case that we decide to be self employed, we decide to do our own thing. If we do that, then a lot of this uncertainty will come up. And then many of us have difficulty dealing with it because we believe that we don't know how to deal with it. But again, trust is so key here is to bring our trust and say that we have done it before. We have been in uncertain environments, conditions before, maybe even worse, right? So I I think of like if we can make things work even in those conditions, in the war zones, in situations that are so unpredictable, if we can make things work there, why wouldn't be able to do that in where we're going for? So that's the four elements that I really want to bring to your attention as to how we can get ourselves making that big leap, whatever that is for ourselves, without mystifying or without making it so difficult or like, I don't really know how that works kind of thing, but rather, okay, I want to make this big leap, whatever the definition of your big leap is and where you're going, right? And then think about what are the obstacles, the things that can come up, and what are the elements that you need to start working on now, especially concentrate on skills. especially when you work on skills and start applying it now in your current conditions, situations, then it will become so much easier, so much faster to make decisions, to go after them, to implement them, to test them, to learn from them, and keep going. And then it just becomes, we just make this road so inevitable for us to succeed that we will not even have much doubt about it. And even if we have doubt about it, we're like, I would rather want to be doing this than something else. And we will always know why this is what we're doing now matters so much. So that's why the the biggest, I guess, the biggest benefit of doing this big leap is it requires a lot of trust. It requires a lot of learning about ourselves. It requires us being so honest with ourselves, because otherwise, why would we just go for that thing that seems very difficult or unreachable, whatever? But because it's our honest truth of this is exactly what we want to be doing, how we want to be living, therefore we are ready to fight for it, go for it, right? So that's why it will require us to be so much more honest, so much more authentic, being really us in that journey. And that's the part that I love about big leaps. And I would love for you to give yourself a chance to explore what it is, how you could get there, what are the steps you could take now, and most importantly, what are the skills you could learn to get there. And these are my suggestions as to work on these skills, and they will always get you amazing results, whether in the end you decide to do a big leap or not. So, my dears, if you want coaching on this, please come coach with me. I would love to coach you to get your own big leap to be getting to where you want to go. Have an amazing week, everyone. I'll speak to you next week.